the webinar. Now I'd like to welcome Scott Oser, President of Scott Oser Associates Incorporated. Please welcome Scott.
Thanks, Destiny, and welcome everyone. I appreciate you joining us here today. This is my first experience doing a webinar for the .org community, and I am very excited. Destiny just surprised me with her departure as well. So Destiny, congratulations on whatever you're going to be doing. You will definitely be missed. I've enjoyed working with you. Today, what we're going to talk about, as you could tell from the title slide, is we want you back, tools to re-engage lapsed members. We've got 30 minutes, well, not totally 30 minutes at this point, so it's going to be pretty quick. I'm going to do everything I can to leave some time at the end for some questions and answers. I am just logistically, I'm sharing my screen, so I have taken off the chat box for now just because it shows up on the screen and then you guys can't see my entire slide. So what I want to do just real quick to sort of launch into this is I have a poll. I want to throw that out there, and if Destiny, you can help me with that, that would be fantastic. Okay, so the question that I'm posing is, what are your current overall retention rates? What are your renewal rates? 90% or above, 80 to 90, 70 to 80, less than 70%, and the dreaded, and there's nothing wrong if you say this, but it is the dreaded scenario where I have no idea what my renewal rates are. The reason I say that up front is because if you don't know what your retention rates are, there is no way for you to prove that you are doing well or not doing well, and there's also no way for you to improve. So even if you're just doing the basic renewal rate calculation of we have a renewal rate of 80%, 90%, whatever it is vital that you start tracking your renewals, because as marketers and as membership people, it's very, very important for us to know what we're doing, to know where we stand, or else we just can't get better. So getting better is going to be very important. We always want to do better. If we're at 90%, maybe we can get to 92. If we're at 80, we can get to 85. There are certain benchmarks depending on industry. I am not a huge benchmarking person, and that's not, I didn't bring this up for benchmarking purposes. But I'm not a huge benchmarking person because I feel that they are nice to know facts. It's nice to know information. It's not always applicable and it's always not pertinent. If we were to say, okay, a trade association industry or a trade association average is 84% and you're at 60%, it sort of doesn't really matter that it's 84% if you're at 60. You're not getting from 60 to 84 overnight. There's no way. So the best thing, in my opinion, to benchmark against is yourselves. The only way to improve is to know where you are, and therefore that is the biggest benchmark. Okay, so you guys can now see the results, right? It looks like we've got people sort of all over the place. Yes, there are some folks in that I have no idea bucket. Again, not to beat on this, but definitely if there's one thing you get from this webinar, make sure that you start tracking your retention rate. You need to start knowing how many people are renewing. You can break that down a million different directions. You can break it down based on term. How long have these people been members? Are you losing your first year members a lot more than you are second year, third year, 10 year? Are you losing certain categories of members? Is it your quote regular members versus your industry partners versus your students, your academics, whatever it might be? But before you go into that detail, if you're not currently measuring your retention rate, again, if you get one thing out of this, you need to be able to develop and track your renewal rate. So why do I ask this question besides saying that it's great that most of you are already tracking your renewal rates and tracking your retention rates, but more importantly, and Destiny, do I need to get rid of that or you can get rid of that? Awesome, I'm just gonna close it and hopefully not blow up the system.
You're good.
Okay, all right, how do I move it out of the way? That's a question. All right, I'm gonna move it way over there on the, oh, now it got bigger. All right, oh, now it got even bigger. This may take our entire half an hour, guys, sorry about that. All right, there we go, now it's gone. Okay, so the reason I asked this question, sorry, let me click through these, I apologize for that. We just did this, right? So here is the result of that, right? Here is the bottom line to what I just presented and what you all helped me with is, as of now, we are all losing members, right? I have not met any associations, any membership organizations, whether it's trade or individual member, that does not lose members. So since we are all losing members, that is why I created this presentation and why I'm presenting this to you all, is that we're all losing members. No matter how amazingly awesome we are, and no matter how well we know our membership, we are going to lose members for a number of different reasons. So what I'm going to do first, here's our agenda, and we're going to, like I said, it is now at 12:38 where I am. I know we've got people in different time zones, but so we're about 8 minutes in, we've got about 22 minutes left. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about briefly why lapsed members are your best prospects and why you need to regularly go after your lapsed members. And then finally, tips for launching a multi-touch, multimedia approach to win back. And if you're not familiar with the term win back, it's basically winning back your lapsed members. It's definitely not a rocket science generated term. It's win back. You want to win back your lapsed members, right? You want to get them back. You want to get them back in the fold. You don't want to lose your former members. And then finally, I've got just a real quick sort of, I wouldn't even call it an exercise about getting it done. You know, what resources do you need to launch this win back strategy, and how are you going to get it done? I'm going to give you a brief opportunity to sort of give that some thought and provide a couple of worksheets along the way, not to do now because we don't really have the time to do it, but to do it on your own and just fill in some gaps so that when we get off the phone, hopefully you'll understand, or when we finish the webinar, hopefully you'll understand why lapsed members are important, how best practices for reaching out to your lapsed members, and then finally what you need to kind of get that started. Okay. All right, so why lapsed members? Number one, your lapsed members have a higher level of familiarity with your association than what I call never members. Never members, as you could guess, are the folks that have not ever been a member of your association. They're not lapsed, they're just cold prospects, right? So your lapsed members, regardless of how much engagement they have had with the association, they have a much higher level of what you do and what you can offer than the folks or the organizations that have not been members before. You can track information in your database as to what that level of familiarity is, what their purchases have been, what their engagement has been, and that's important information to use because that knowledge and that understanding, it cuts down that learning curve. With someone who has never been a member of your organization, you've got to educate them on whatever the benefits and the services that you provide that are applicable to them. You need to let them know from sort of ground zero what's going on, why your lapsed members have some level of familiarity, even if they've only gotten your e-newsletter or only gotten your publication or only participated in an annual meeting or something like that. They have some level of familiarity with what you provide and how you can benefit and how they can benefit from being a member. So that's it's an early starting point. It's sort of a low bar of a starting point, but it is good to know at least they know something about you already. I guess I'm clicking in the wrong part of my mouse pad. Okay, they know your value, and I say presumably. You'll see that there are a couple of presumablys after these tips. It's sort of like that asterisk because we, as associations and many other organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, it really doesn't matter, we do a very good job of communicating. We don't always do a great job of communicating in a way that our members will listen or that our members understand. And we can't force our members to open our emails. We can't force our members to read our magazines. We can't force our members to pay attention to all of the little details of the things that we offer, because we all live in a world now where we're bombarded with marketing messages. I think the last time I looked at some research, we're getting like 70 or 80 marketing messages a day, and I think it's even higher than that. But you could sort of pick your poison about which research you want to look at. So the reason I say presumably is that we have to cut through the clutter, right? For current members and for lapsed members. And this really, they know your value presumably reflects more on your current members and your communication process to make sure that they do understand it. But assuming that you're going to get through to a good number of your members when they are still on the membership rosters, they should understand, or they will definitely understand better what your value is than someone who has never been a member, because you are regularly, or you should be regularly communicating that to people. So again, another step, another benefit to reaching lapsed members is that they already know your value. Supposedly, they presumably know your value. They have some past activities with the association. This is important from just an awareness perspective, sort of like in bullet one, they have a higher level of familiarity with the association. but it also can help you in your marketing. It can help you in your outreach. If you know that lapsed members have utilized certain products, certain services, have volunteered, have done any of those kind of things, you can use that to target your messages to your lapsed members. And you can say to them, hey, you did this in the past, you did that, you took advantage of this, all of those sort of things. It shows, number one, things that they're going to be missing, right? Things that they're not getting access to anymore. But they also have that knowledge of, and it kind of goes back to the first two bullets, they also have that knowledge of what you do, of who you are, and of how you can, and if they were to come back, how they are going to once again benefit from membership. So the tracking of your past activities, I always sort of say that some of this is going to depend on your database, your association management system. Sometimes you have easy access to this information, sometimes you don't, but somewhere in there you do know what your lapsed members have done with you before, so you can use that and put that information to your advantage. All right, you have permission to contact them, and I will sort of give the disclaimer that everybody gives when they talk about GDPR or those kind of things. I am not a lawyer, but I just was at Membership and Marketing Conference for MASAE, and one of the sessions I went to was on GDPR and permissions and those kind of things. It's an interesting world that we're living in right now, but my understanding is that because these people were lapsed members, and because I'm trying to think the exact terminology that they used, but because it's not a business reason, but it's something like that. Because we have a business reason, I'm just going to use that for now, to contact them, we have permission to reach out to them, in particular to ask them to rejoin the association. So, I would check with your attorneys. GDPR keeps changing. States are bringing in legislation. It's changing every day. But we need to be really careful with any list that we rent, because that puts us a little bit at risk. Emails especially, direct mail a little bit less so. But we do currently, with the way things stand, from my understanding, have permission to contact lapsed members, and that can be a big hurdle to overcome, is that you never know. You don't want to put yourself legally at risk. You don't want to get banned. You don't want to get fined. Not a lot of the fining and legal side of things has happened quite yet, especially to associations. It's happening to more of the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, but we just need to be very careful about that. And the bottom line is that we have permission currently, from my understanding, to contact lapsed members. We have that permission. They've given it to us. Okay, oops, I went too far. Now I went way too far. You have good contact information, again, presumably. I mentioned AMSs, I mentioned databases, I mentioned member tracking. We should have good up-to-date information for our lapsed members. I understand that if it's an individual membership organization, some people may have lapsed because they switched organizations. Some people may have lapsed because they retired. But for the large majority of folks, we will still have good contact information. We can use change of address services, those kind of things. So if they did move on, we can still track them. So that is obviously a benefit to us, because we already have that information in hand. So we don't have to necessarily enhance data. We don't have to buy data. And as good as the best list that you rent is, it's not going to be as up to date as your own list. So we do presumably have good contact information for folks. To tag on to that, where there is no cost to get lapsed members information. We have it, right? We don't have to purchase a list. We don't have to rent a list. We don't have to go to a third party and give them money to get names. We don't always have to do that with prospects, but we often have to do that with prospects, because if we don't have them in our own database, if they haven't expressed interest, or if they haven't attended a conference with us or something like that, then we're not going to have the information. So we got to get it from somewhere, right? We need to reach out to a third-party vendor and get that information, and that has a cost to it. They've paid you before. This is sort of a mental thing. It's a logistical and a mental thing. We all make decisions, whether we're at a trade association or we are at an individual membership organization. As human beings, we make a decision to pay for something, or to buy something, or to commit to something. And the first time you do that is typically the hardest. So to get someone to join is one hurdle. It's a pretty high hurdle. to get them to come back is a much lower hurdle because they have already got in their brains, hey, I've done this before. I understand what I'm doing. I know what this is about. So it's more of a come back message as opposed to spend more money with us, rejoin, those kind of things. It's a much lower hurdle. And depending on the organization, and this is true a lot more for trade organizations, trade associations than it is for individual membership organizations, is that once you're in their billing system, it's a lot easier to get paid than having to set somebody up in a billing system, whether it's through a PO system or their accounting system or whatever it is. You're already in there, so getting that paid again or restarted is much easier than getting it started for the first time. Contact preferences are known, again, presumably. This has to, I know I keep harping on this a little bit, has to do with your AMS or your marketing software. If you know how people like to be contacted, you can use that information to contact them in a similar way. It is always true, or it has been almost always true in direct marketing, that if you reach out to someone, if you contact someone based on how they responded the first time, you're much more likely to get a higher response rate. You're much more likely to get in contact with them. So this is just a number of reasons of why you need to focus on your lapsed members. They are a very lucrative group. Hopefully they're not a huge group, but they are a very good segment for you to go after that almost always, from what I've seen, almost always has a much higher response rate than your, we'll just call them never members or your prospects. Okay, so tips to creating a strong win-back plan. Some of these are going to be kind of basic, but I think they are very important to go over and to remind people of. Number one, personalize it. I work with a client right now, and for sake of time, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. We just did a win-back campaign. And it was the first time we had done a win-back they had done a win-back campaign in a long time. And one of the first steps we took was to make sure it was personalized. And we did that in a number of different ways. Here's a couple examples. Number one, the lowest level or the lowest form of personalization you can do is make sure that you have their data filled out, right? First, their name, their address, where they live, degrees. This was important for this group because there are a lot of different degrees. And as you can see from this slide, it says, Dear Doctor, right? We actually did 2 different segments, one for physicians, one for technologists in the ultrasound world. So we had the technologists are the people who are actually doing and manning the ultrasound machines. The physicians are the ones who are overseeing the care, but they had those 2 member segments. So we made sure that as we sent out this is a direct mail piece, we did email as well, but in the direct mail piece, we made sure that at the basic level, we knew their name, we had their degree, and we did Dear Doctor, whoever it was. And so that way it looks like it is personalized. Those of us in the marketing world know this is not a one-off letter. I did not go onto my Microsoft Word and type this in and mail it, but at least that way they know we're not just saying, Dear former member, or dear colleague, or dear friend, or dear whoever. I know this is low level and it sounds like it may be simple, but I have seen lots of organizations that come out with those things because it saves them a little bit of time. The result is that people feel that they're not being talked to personally, that you don't care, you're just reaching out to them, that there's sort of another check that's coming in the door, and that's not good. So another thing is to make it targeted. I sort of define personalization more as who they are and who they are sort of logistically, their name, their address, their role, their certification, any of that data that is sort of personal to an individual from a very logistical perspective. And what I mean by targeting, it was what I was describing a little bit before, is we all have different segments within our membership. So and I gave some of these examples when I was talking before, whether it's students versus academics versus industry partners versus in SVU's case, it was physicians versus technologists. So we put our members into 2 big buckets, or our labs members, technologists and physicians, and we based our mailing off of that. You saw one tiny little thing we did before where it was Dear Doctor and we had the degrees and those kind of things, but here's a couple of other examples. Again, physicians, technologists. So the letter to the physician went as a physician who previously held membership in the Society for Vascular Ultrasound. Obviously, we are telling them that we know who they are. We recognize them as a physician, which for doctors, academics, some other groups, lawyers, probably some other things, it's very important that you identify them as who they are, because they've taken a lot of time and spent a lot of money, and they take a lot of pride in what they do. And then the other side of this was, and this was all done through variable data printing. We saved a lot of money by doing variable data printing, and it also gave us the customization. So as a professional stenographer who previously held membership, right? Not rocket science here again, just the stenographers get the stenographer letter, the physicians get the physician letter. There's another example. SVU is the only membership organization dedicated solely to advancing blah, blah, blah. They actually, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in this for time, but the physicians get a certification called an RPVI, and the technologists get one of these 3 different certifications. So again, they value that. They spent time and energy, sort of like we would a CAE or something else. So we made sure to use that information to our advantage. Again, we want them to know that we know who they are. We want to customize as much as possible these letters so that they go, cool, I get it. I'm a technologist. This is my world, and you guys understand my world. I'm a physician, you get it, that's my world, and you guys understand my world. We did that. One other small thing that we did was we used 2 different signatures. The letter to the technologists only had Joseph P. Hughes, JP Hughes, he's a ultrasound guy, a technician. We used only his signature in the technologist letter, and we used both of these signatures in the physician's letter because obviously the physician director, right? Whole thing, target, technologists, physicians, make sure that they both get the appropriate messages. All right, be consistent. Win back needs to be done more than once a year. It's not just a, hey, we're gonna do this every 2 or 3 years. We're just gonna throw it in there. We're gonna hope that people come back. We're gonna hope that they miss us. No, be consistent. You need to do it in as many ways as you can, whether it's lapsed member offers for people that are going to your annual conference or have been to your annual conference, or just sort of a 2-time a year direct mail, email campaign, whatever. It is not just a one-off thing that you can do every once in a while and assume people will come back. It needs to be a regular activity. It's has a very, very strong and positive ROI, so there's no reason not to do it. Next thing, get your attention, right? Get their attention. One of the things that I always say is, since you have had them as members before, they recognize your organization, right? So what we did, this is the outer to the direct mail. One of the biggest things that you can do to get them to understand that it's coming from you is to include your logo, right? We put our logo on the outside. Hopefully they will open that because they have a past relationship with us. So use your logo, use your brand to your advantage. And then the other thing is create urgency, right? Get their attention by creating urgency. I'm not going to go into all the detail. They were calendar year, January 1 to December 31. So by getting people to join by September 30th, we sent this out about 6 weeks before the 30th, so middle of August. They were able to get 15 months for the price of 12. So we gave them a special offer, which had a deadline. We sent some email reminders and things, but we created urgency. We got their attention by offering them something special. Show them the value. This is pretty straightforward, but I think 2 of the things that you can offer to folks in your renewal, in your win back letter, is what they are missing that you have always offered, what they are missing that they had access to when they were members. So here's a little bit about how we did that with SVU, enhance your career, support your field. Notice it's all about you. It's not about you as in the member. It's not about the association. It's more about how you're going to benefit them. But then what is new? What are the new things that you have created? What are new things that you have launched? So it shows them, hey, you're also going to now get access once again to these benefits that will help you in these ways. But then we've created these things. So they see what they're missing, but they also see what is new, which is very, very important. And we did this very directly. So what's new at SVU? And we sort of listed a bunch of things which really worked very well. So here's just sort of an idea, real quick. You can go in and fill this out. What are they missing? What's new? Do it by segment. Pretty quick, pretty easy. What are they missing? What's new? And then finally, optimize your resources. I'm going to go through this just real quick. Determine your available resources. If you're not currently doing WinBack, or if you don't have dedicated resources put to WinBack, you should, because as I keep saying, and part of the reason, we all have lapsed members. We're all losing members. They do come back. They do have a much higher ROI than your other outreach campaigns, but I sort of put them into buckets, right? Determine your available resources. Financial, human, and technical, what can you do in those areas? If you're missing in one of those three areas or totally lacking in one of those three areas, you've got to adjust, you've got to do something different. So those are how sort of the buckets that I put resources into, self-explanatory. And then once you've done all that, develop your implementation plan. How many times who are you going to reach out to? What are you going to do? Whether it's email, direct mail, telemarketing, how's it going to happen? When is it going to happen? So sort of timing, and then just once you can sort of use this as a skeleton for your plan. What resources do you have? Who, what, when are you going to do things? And then just go out and try it. And you're going to want to track and you're going to want to learn every time you do it, whether it's your offer that you're changing, whether it's how far back to lapsed members you're going, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 years, how far. All of those things can be tested, but the bottom line is you need to start doing win back on a consistent basis. So I know we've got about 2 minutes, and I know the time was a little bit short. I saw the chat box popping up on me a couple of times. Destiny, I don't know what the easiest way to sort of take questions is, so I'll let you lead in on that one.
I'll go ahead and read some to you. Let's see, from Lonnie, lapsed members join for a reason, but they also left for a reason. Do you survey your recently lapsed members to find out why they didn't renew?
Yes, I think that you can use lapsed member surveys as a great tool for two things. One, to find out why they did not renew, and two, also as a way to get them to renew. Often, I mean, it's scary to say, but oftentimes our members don't renew because they just forgot or they put it aside. So oftentimes what I have seen in my experience is that if you can get that survey out there, you will get some good data, but you will be surprised, or you won't be surprised at how many people actually renew off of that lapsed member survey.
Thank you. One thing to know, I believe Allie mentioned earlier, right when we were getting started, how far back should you go to try and reach lapsed members? And when do they drop? 90, 120 days, 120 plus?
This can be a longer answer. I will make it as short as possible. I truly believe, to answer the second part of that question for Allie, I truly believe you should cut off benefits at expiration. I don't believe in what most people call a grace period. I think it just delays their renewal. It trains them to say, hey, I can take my time. I don't have to worry about it. And whether it's truly something that people think about or it's sort of is subliminal, I truly believe that happens. If you're not going, if it's, hey, this is your first notice of 5 and you expire on August 31st, but you're still getting benefits as of September 31st and October 31st, why am I rushing to pay? Where's the urgency there? So go back to one of my earlier points, create urgency, make people do it now. There's no reason why any members should pay after their expiration date, or why you should spend any money to provide benefits to people who have expired, who have already expired. The lapsed member stuff that I'm talking about here with special offers, we only offered it to individuals and to organizations that had been expired for at least a year. I don't recommend that you offer anything special to anyone who just lapsed, because even if 2 or 3 or 5 people or companies take advantage of this, you're basically giving money away, right? You don't want to reward someone for renewing 30 days, 60 days, 90 days after their expire. You want to keep approaching them to renew, but you don't want to offer them something special, because they may or may not, but there is a possibility that they learn that that's what happens. And so again, sort of with the grace period, why would they renew on time if they know that at some point they're going to get something for free?
Thank you. We have a couple more questions. How long after a member lapses would you reach out again?
I think that you have to test that. We started with SVU, and when I actually was an employee at a couple of different associations before I went out on my own. And we would always try a year or 2 lapsed. And then if that worked, go a little bit further back. You're going to hit a point where it's just not effective any longer. You'll see it in returned mail. You'll see it in response rates. You'll see it in emails. If those sorts of things just stop working, then you'll know that you sort of hit that wall. But I've heard of organizations that go back 4 years, 5 years, because sometimes people's careers change, they go off in one direction, and then they come back where they were, right? So you never know. That's what you're going to get. And really, if you have the money to do it, and if you have the resources to do it, what you're comparing this to is your new member recruitment. So as long as going back to lapsed members is more cost effective and more efficient than reaching out to new members, keep going back, right? There's no reason not to. It's sort of, the analogy is, and it's a very closely related analogy, but I'm sure many of us have heard, keep adding renewal notices until it costs more than it does to bring in a new member. It's the same sort of thing. Keep going back and keep trying it until it costs more than bringing in a new member, because I know I've beaten this to death a little bit, but your response rates for lapsed members are always going to be higher than the cost of bringing in a new member, until they're not, right? Until, if you're going 7 years back and all of a sudden it's $30 to bring in a member, and I'm just throwing out numbers, $30 to bring in that lapsed member back, but it only costs you $20 to bring in a new member. Why are you doing it at $30, right? You know that you should have cut it off sooner, because you're just throwing good money at that point.
Thank you. Kathy asks, what is a reasonable expectation for percent responding and renewing due to these campaigns?
It is truly going to vary by industry, but when we just did it with Society for Vascular Ultrasound, and like I said, we went back 2 years, on the win-back side, we were hitting almost a 5% response rate. That's in total. That's including email. We didn't have, I apologize for having to say this, but I was working through their systems in some ways when it came to tracking. We did direct mail and then an email follow-up for everybody that we sent it to. We sent the direct mail piece to. And we couldn't really, because of their systems, see who came in directly through the email and who came in through the direct mail piece. We sort of could, but when we tallied it all up, we ended up with around a 5% response rate, which is crazy good. And again, you're benchmarking that against what you would see on a new member campaign. So new member campaigns, unless it's a really niche audience or unless you're a unique organization, you're looking at 1% or less for response rate. So to get 5%, it was a no-brainer for us to do this again. And we're actually going to be doing it again starting in this August.
Awesome. So Lonnie has 2 questions, and I figured you could probably share, I could get her email to you, or Lonnie's email to you. Do you have any other samples of your campaign materials to share? So maybe you could share possibly some of those with Lonnie. And then second question is, how often do you contact lapsed members throughout the year?
As I mentioned, yes, I have some other things that I can share. I can actually share. I couldn't put it here because it would have just overwhelmed the whole screen, and it would have been very, very small. But I can share the entire letters with you. That's not a problem. And the follow-up emails, I have all that information. I'm willing to share it. I didn't go into detail on this, but what I recommend when it comes to win-back, if you're doing direct mail, right? Email, you can figure out what that is. The SVU, as I mentioned, was calendar year, which is fine. I'm not going to complain about calendar year, but it does limit your recruitment, right? Because you're not going to send somebody a recruitment campaign or a recruitment piece that they get in September and they join in September when they're up for renewal again January 1, right? You can't do it. If you're on a rolling anniversary cycle, sure, you can do recruitment all year long because they're getting 12 months no matter when they join. But what I would typically say is figure out what your recruitment schedule is and figure out what makes sense. Most organizations that I have seen, most associations, do recruitment like a true recruitment campaign, just recruitment outreach, not come to our conference and join, or take this webinar and get a discount as a member, not sort of those combo offers, but truly join our association. You are a prospect. We know this is a value to join our association 1 or 2 times a year. If you can do it 2 times a year, that's fantastic. And then what I would say is for cost efficiencies, again, we're talking about direct mail, you can make it email, but let's just say this way, for resource efficiencies, if you can tie it into when you're doing your recruitment campaign, again, just true win back. We want you back, come back. You have lapsed, we want you back. Here's how you do it. No combo offers, no anything, tied to something else. Just truly, we want you back. If you can tie it into when you're doing recruitment, it's a slightly different message, but you're going to probably be using the same buckets. You're going to be using the same segments. You're going to be using the same personalization methods. So it saves you a ton of time and a ton of money. So it helps you from a resource perspective. So I would say that besides doing some unique things like around your annual conference or something like that, I would set aside, depending on your seasonality and your resources, probably 2 times a year to do your recruitment and your win back, and tie them together, because a printer can do it and make it cheaper for you. Your designer, if you need to do it that way, can make it cheaper and easier for you. And if you're doing email, it's just easier on you, right? Because you're only doing it once. You're not having to worry about, okay, our recruitment campaign is this time and our win back campaign is this time. Do it around the same time, but you got to figure out in your membership cycle, based on your industry, what the best timing is for you.